The opulent Alcott mansion stood proudly atop Beacon Hill, its manicured lawns and towering marble columns a testament to the immense wealth and power of its inhabitants. Inside, 28-year-old Lucas Alcott gazed out the floor-to-ceiling windows of his father's study, his piercing blue eyes fixed on the Boston skyline. He ran a hand through his perfectly coiffed dark hair, a gesture that betrayed the inner turmoil beneath his composed exterior. "Lucas, are you even listening to me?" The stern voice of Jonathan Alcott, Lucas's father and one of the most influential businessmen in New England, cut through the air like a knife. Lucas turned, facing the man who had shaped every aspect of his life since birth. "Yes, father, you were saying something about the merger with Sterling Industries?" Jonathan's steel-gray eyes narrowed. "This isn't just something, Lucas. This merger could double our net worth overnight. I need you focused, son. Your mind seems to be elsewhere these days." If only his father knew how right he was. Lucas's thoughts had indeed been preoccupied, but not with business deals or stock options. No, his mind was consumed by something far more dangerous in the eyes of Jonathan Alcott: love. "I apologize, father. You have my full attention," Lucas lied smoothly, his years of practiced obedience kicking in. As Jonathan launched into another lecture about the importance of staying ahead in the cutthroat world of high finance, Lucas's mind drifted once again. This time, to the reason for his distraction, Mia Hernandez. Mia had worked as a housekeeper for the Alcott family for the past 5 years. At first, Lucas had barely noticed her, too wrapped up in his world of privilege and excess. But over time, something changed. He began to see beyond her simple uniform, to the warmth in her honey-brown eyes, the quiet strength in her gentle movements, and the kindness that seemed to radiate from her very being. It started with small interactions, a shared smile as she tidied his room, a brief conversation in the hallway. Before long, Lucas found himself seeking out reasons to be near her. He'd linger in the kitchen while she prepared meals, offering to help and relishing in her musical laughter when he inevitably made a mess. He'd, accidentally, encounter her in the garden, marveling at her knowledge of the flowers she tenderly cared for. Slowly but surely, Lucas Alcott, heir to a fortune and darling of Boston's elite, fell hopelessly in love with Mia Hernandez, the humble housekeeper from a small town in Mexico. "Lucas," his father's sharp tone snapped him back to reality. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. Your head is in the clouds, boy. How do you expect to take over the company one day if you can't even pay attention during a simple conversation?" Lucas straightened his shoulders, squaring off against his father's disapproving glare. "I'm sorry, father. It won't happen again." Jonathan sighed, his expression softening slightly. "Look, son, I know I push you hard, but it's for your own good. The world out there is ruthless. You need to be prepared." "I understand," Lucas replied, the words tasting bitter on his tongue. How could he make his father understand that there was more to life than mergers and acquisitions? That true happiness couldn't be measured in dollar signs or stock options? As if on cue, a soft knock on the study door interrupted their tense exchange. "Come in," Jonathan called out, irritation clear in his voice. The door opened, and there she was, Mia, a vision in her simple black dress and white apron. "I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Alcott," she said, her melodic voice sending a shiver down Lucas's spine. "But Mrs. Alcott asked me to remind you about the charity gala this evening." Jonathan waved his hand dismissively. Yes. Tell my wife I'll be ready in time." As Mia turned to leave, he added, "And make sure my tuxedo is pressed, will you?" "Of course, sir," Mia replied with a polite nod. As she exited, her eyes briefly met Lucas's, and in that fleeting moment, a world of unspoken emotion passed between them. The door closed, and Lucas found himself staring at the spot where Mia had stood, his heart racing. He was so lost in thought that he almost missed his father's next words. "You know, Lucas, it's about time we discussed your future in more personal terms." Lucas turned, eyebrow raised. "What do you mean, father?" Jonathan leaned back in his leather chair, fingers steepled. "You're approaching 30, son. It's time you started thinking about settling down, continuing the Alcott legacy." A cold dread settled in Lucas's stomach. He knew exactly where this conversation was headed. "I've been talking with Charles Worthington," Jonathan continued, oblivious to his son's discomfort. "His daughter, Olivia, has just returned from finishing school in Switzerland. She's a lovely girl, comes from an excellent family. I think you two would hit it off splendidly." Lucas felt as if the walls were closing in on him. The idea of being set up with some society debutante, of being pushed into a loveless marriage for the sake of business connections and social standing, was suffocating. "Father, I appreciate your concern, but I'm perfectly capable of managing my own personal life," Lucas said, struggling to keep his voice even. Jonathan's eyes hardened. "This isn't just about your personal life, Lucas. It's about the future of this family, of our company. The right marriage can open doors, create alliances. It's not just about love, it's about strategy." The words hit Lucas like a physical blow. Is that all marriage was to his father? A business transaction? A way to climb even higher on the social ladder? "I understand the importance of our family's legacy, Father," Lucas began carefully, "but surely you can't expect me to marry someone I don't even know, let alone love?" Jonathan let out a bark of laughter. "Love? Lucas, you're not a child anymore. Love is a luxury we can't afford in our position. Your mother and I had an arranged marriage, and look how well that turned out." Lucas bit back a retort. He knew all too well how his parents' marriage had turned out. A cold, distant relationship held together by social obligations and shared business interests. Is that what his father wanted for him? "I'm not asking you to propose tomorrow," Jonathan continued, his tone softening slightly. "Just meet with Olivia. Get to know her. Who knows? You might find you have more in common than you think." Lucas nodded numbly, knowing there was no point in arguing further. "If it means that much to you, Father, I'll meet with her." Jonathan smiled, clearly pleased with himself. "Excellent. I'll have my assistant set something up for next week. Now, why don't you go get ready for the gala? Your mother will have my head if we're late." As Lucas left the study, his mind was in turmoil. How had his life become so complicated? On one side, there was the weight of his family's expectations, the carefully laid plans for his future. On the other, there was Mia, sweet, beautiful Mia, who made his heart race with a single smile. He made his way to his room, lost in thought. As he approached, he saw Mia exiting, his freshly pressed tuxedo draped carefully over her arm. "Oh, Mr. Lucas," she said, startled by his sudden appearance. "I was just dropping off your tuxedo for tonight's event." "Thank you, Mia," Lucas replied, his voice soft. He took the garment from her, their fingers brushing for the briefest moment. The touch sent electricity coursing through his body. Mia's cheeks flushed a delicate pink. "Will there be anything else you need, Mr. Lucas?" In that moment, looking into her warm brown eyes, Lucas wanted to tell her everything. He wanted to confess his love, to sweep her into his arms and kiss her senseless. He wanted to run away with her, far from the suffocating expectations of his family and the cold, calculating world of high society. Instead, he simply said, "No, thank you, Mia. That will be all." She nodded, turning to leave. But before she could take more than a step, Lucas found himself reaching out, gently grasping her wrist. "Mia, wait." She turned back, her eyes wide with surprise and something else, hope. "Yes, Mr. Lucas?" Lucas's heart pounded in his chest. He knew he was crossing a line, knew that his father would be furious if he could see them now. But in that moment, he didn't care. "I was wondering, would you like to take a walk with me in the garden tomorrow morning? Before the rest of the household is awake?" Mia's eyes widened further, a mix of emotions playing across her face, surprise, joy, and a hint of fear. "Mr. Lucas, I don't know if that would be appropriate." "Please," Lucas said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Just a walk, nothing more." For a long moment, Mia was silent, her internal struggle visible in her expressive eyes. Finally, she gave a small nod. "All right, tomorrow morning, at dawn." Relief and excitement flooded through Lucas. "Thank you, Mia. I'll see you then." As Mia hurried away, Lucas entered his room, closing the door behind him. He leaned against it, his mind racing. He knew he was playing a dangerous game. If his father found out about his feelings for Mia, the consequences would be severe. But as he thought about their upcoming walk, about the chance to finally be alone with her, he couldn't bring himself to care. Little did Lucas know, as he dressed for the gala that evening, that his secret rendezvous with Mia would set in motion a chain of events that would shake the very foundations of his world. For Mia Hernandez was not just a simple housekeeper, and the secret she carried would soon turn Lucas's life upside down in ways he could never have imagined. As the sun set over Boston, casting a golden glow over the Alcott mansion, the stage was set for a tale of forbidden love, shocking revelations, and the power of the human heart to overcome even the most insurmountable odds. Lucas Alcott's journey was about to begin, and nothing would ever be the same again. The cool morning air carried the sweet scent of blooming roses as Lucas made his way through the Alcott mansion's expansive gardens. The sun had barely peeked over the horizon, casting a soft, golden glow over the dew-kissed flowers and manicured lawns. His heart raced with anticipation as he approached the old stone fountain that served as their agreed-upon meeting spot. And there she was. Mia stood with her back to him, her dark hair falling in loose waves down her back, free from its usual tight bun. She wore a simple sundress instead of her housekeeper's uniform, and the sight of her took Lucas's breath away. "Mia," he called softly, not wanting to startle her. She turned, and the smile that lit up her face was more radiant than the rising sun. "Mr. Lucas," she replied, a hint of shyness in her voice. "Please," he said, closing the distance between them, "when we're alone like this, it's just Lucas." A blush crept across Mia's cheeks. "All right, Lucas." They began to walk side by side, their footsteps crunching softly on the gravel path. For a few moments, they were silent, both acutely aware of the other's presence, of the electricity that seemed to crackle in the air between them. "Thank you for meeting me," Lucas finally said, breaking the silence. "I know it's a risk." Mia nodded, her expression turning serious. "It is. If your father found out." "He won't," Lucas assured her quickly, perhaps too quickly. They both knew the consequences if Jonathan Alcott discovered his son's feelings for the family housekeeper. They walked on, talking softly about inconsequential things, the beauty of the garden, the unseasonably warm weather, the upcoming social events that kept the Alcott household buzzing with activity. But beneath the surface of their casual conversation, deeper currents swirled. As they rounded a corner, hidden from view by a high hedge, Lucas couldn't contain himself any longer. He reached out, gently taking Mia's hand in his. She froze for a moment, her eyes wide with surprise, but she didn't pull away. "Mia," Lucas began, his voice thick with emotion, "I need to tell you something. I have feelings for you. Strong feelings. I know it's complicated, I know there are 1,000 reasons why this can't work, but I can't deny what's in my heart any longer." Mia's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "Lucas, I feel the same way. But you're right, it's complicated. We come from different worlds. Your family would never accept me." "I don't care about that," Lucas said fiercely. "I don't care about their expectations or their plans for me. All I care about is you." Before Mia could respond, Lucas leaned in and kissed her. It was a gentle kiss, full of tenderness and promise, but it sent shockwaves through both of them. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathless. "We'll find a way," Lucas whispered, resting his forehead against hers. "I promise you, Mia. We'll find a way to be together." Little did they know, their secret rendezvous had not gone unnoticed. From a second-floor window of the mansion, a pair of cold, calculating eyes had witnessed their intimate moment. Veronica Alcott, Lucas's mother, watched with a mixture of shock and fury as her son embraced the housekeeper. This would not do. This would not do at all. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of secret meetings and stolen moments for Lucas and Mia. They found every excuse to be near each other, lingering glances across crowded rooms, accidental encounters in empty hallways, hushed conversations in the garden under the cover of darkness. Their love blossomed like a delicate flower, beautiful but fragile, always at risk of being crushed by the harsh realities of their world. Lucas did his best to maintain a facade of normalcy around his family. He attended business meetings with his father, played the dutiful son at social gatherings, and even agreed to meet Olivia Worthington for lunch. But his heart wasn't in any of it. His thoughts were constantly with Mia, dreaming of a future where they could be together openly, without fear or shame. Mia, for her part, threw herself into her work with renewed vigor, determined not to give anyone cause to suspect her of impropriety. But in quiet moments, when she was alone in her small room in the servants' quarters, she allowed herself to dream. Dream of a life with Lucas, of love and happiness beyond anything she had ever known. But as their romance deepened, so too did the web of secrets and lies that surrounded them. One evening, as Mia was tidying up the library, she overheard a heated conversation between Lucas's parents. Curious, she moved closer to the door, careful to remain out of sight. "I'm telling you, Jonathan, there's something going on between Lucas and that housekeeper girl," Veronica Alcott's voice hissed. "Don't be ridiculous," Jonathan replied dismissively. "Lucas knows better than to get involved with the help. Besides, he's agreed to meet with Olivia Worthington. The merger with Sterling Industries is practically in the bag." "Open your eyes," Veronica snapped. "I've seen the way they look at each other. If we don't nip this in the bud now, it could ruin everything we've worked for." There was a long pause, and when Jonathan spoke again, his voice was cold and determined. "Very well. If what you're saying is true, we'll need to take care of this situation. Discreetly, of course." Mia's blood ran cold. She backed away from the door, her mind racing. She had to warn Lucas, had to find a way to protect their love from his parents' machinations. But as she turned to leave, she bumped into a side table, sending a vase crashing to the floor. The sound of shattering porcelain echoed through the quiet house. "Who's there?" Jonathan's voice boomed. Mia froze, her heart pounding in her chest. She could hear footsteps approaching, knew she had only seconds to act. In a moment of desperation, she ducked behind a heavy velvet curtain, praying she wouldn't be discovered. The library door flew open, and she could hear Jonathan and Veronica entering the room. "It must have been that damned cat," Veronica said, her voice closer now. "I've told Lucas 100 times not to let it roam the house." Jonathan replied, not sounding entirely convinced. "Well, have one of the maids clean this up in the morning. Come, my dear, let's retire for the evening. We have much to discuss regarding our son's future." Mia held her breath as the Alcotts left the room, the door closing behind them with a soft click. Only when she was certain they were gone did she emerge from her hiding place, her legs shaking. She had to find Lucas. Now, Lucas was in his room, poring over some financial reports his father had insisted he review, when a soft knock at his door startled him. He opened it to find Mia, her face pale and her eyes wide with fear. "Mia, what's wrong?" he asked, quickly ushering her inside and closing the door. In hushed tones, Mia recounted what she had overheard in the library. With each word, Lucas's expression darkened. "I knew they wouldn't understand," he said, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "But to actually plot against us? My own parents? What are we going to do?" Mia asked, her voice trembling. Lucas took her hands in his blue eyes blazing with determination. "We're going to do what we should have done from the beginning. We're going to leave, tonight." Mia gasped. "Leave? But Lucas, your family, your inheritance. None of that matters to me," he said fiercely. "You're what matters, Mia. Our love. I'd give up everything for you." Tears welled up in Mia's eyes. "Are you sure? This is your whole life we're talking about." Lucas cupped her face gently, wiping away a stray tear with his thumb. "You are my life now, Mia. The rest is just details." They spent the next hour in a frenzy of quiet activity. Lucas packed a bag with essentials and as much cash as he could gather. Mia slipped down to the servants' quarters to collect her meager belongings. They agreed to meet at the garden gate at midnight. As the old grandfather clock in the hall struck 12, Lucas made his way through the darkened house, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. This was it. He was leaving behind everything he had ever known, stepping into an uncertain future with only his love for Mia to guide him. He reached the garden gate, scanning the shadows anxiously. Where was she? Minutes ticked by. each one feeling like an eternity. Had something gone wrong? Had his parents discovered their plan? Just as panic began to set in, he heard the soft crunch of gravel. Mia emerged from the darkness, a small suitcase in her hand and a look of fierce determination on her face. "Are you ready?" Lucas whispered, reaching out to take her hand. Mia nodded, squeezing his hand tightly. "I'm ready." Together, they slipped through the gate and into the night, leaving behind the opulent Alcott mansion and all the expectations and obligations that came with it. They were free, but their journey was far from over. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of movement and emotion for Lucas and Mia. They traveled south, using cash to avoid leaving an electronic trail, staying in small motels and keeping a low profile. Lucas knew his father would spare no expense in trying to find him, to drag him back to the life he had left behind. But despite the constant fear of discovery, despite the hardships of their new nomadic lifestyle, Lucas and Mia had never been happier. Free from the constraints of their former lives, their love blossomed and deepened. They talked for hours, sharing their hopes and dreams, learning every facet of each other's personalities. One evening, as they sat on the beach watching the sun set over the Gulf of Mexico, Lucas turned to Mia, his eyes shining with love and determination. "Marry me," he said simply. Mia's eyes widened in surprise. "What? Marry me," Lucas repeated, taking her hands in his. "I know we don't have much right now. I know we're still figuring things out, but I love you, Mia. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you be my wife?" Tears of joy spilled down Mia's cheeks as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you, Lucas." They were married the next day in a small chapel, with only the officiant and a couple of kind strangers as witnesses. It wasn't the lavish society wedding Lucas's parents had always envisioned for him, but as he slipped a simple gold band onto Mia's finger, he knew he had never been happier. That night, as they lay in each other's arms in their modest motel room, Lucas felt a sense of peace he had never known before. This was where he belonged. With Mia, the rest of the world could disappear, and he would be content. But the world had other plans for the newlyweds. A week after their impromptu wedding, as they were preparing to move on to their next destination, Lucas received a text message from an unknown number. His blood ran cold as he read the words on the screen. "I know where you are. We need to talk. Meet me at the Blue Crab Diner at noon. Come alone. Dad." Lucas stared at the phone, his mind racing. How had his father found them? What should he do? Mia noticed his distress immediately. "Lucas? What's wrong?" He showed her the message, watching as fear and worry clouded her beautiful features. "You can't go," she said immediately. "It's too dangerous. What if it's a trap?" Lucas shook his head. "I have to go, Mia. If I don't, he'll just keep looking for us. Maybe I can reason with him. Make him understand." Mia looked skeptical, but she knew there was no talking Lucas out of it once he had made up his mind. "Promise me you'll be careful," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Promise me you'll come back to me." Lucas pulled her close, kissing her deeply. "I promise," he whispered against her lips. "Nothing could keep me from you." As Lucas walked into the Blue Crab Diner at precisely noon, his eyes scanned the room, finally landing on a familiar figure seated in a corner booth. Jonathan Alcott looked older than Lucas remembered, lines of worry etched deeply into his face. Lucas slid into the booth across from his father, his posture tense, ready for a confrontation. "Hello, Father," he said coolly. Jonathan studied his son for a long moment before speaking. "You look well, Lucas. Marriage seems to agree with you." Lucas blinked in surprise. "You know?" A wry smile tugged at Jonathan's lips. "I have my sources. Congratulations, by the way. I'm sorry I couldn't be there for the ceremony." The sarcasm in his father's voice made Lucas's jaw clench. "Why are you here, Dad? How did you find us?" Jonathan's expression turned serious. "I'm here because there's something you need to know, Lucas. Something about your wife." Lucas felt a chill run down his spine. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that Mia Hernandez isn't who you think she is," Jonathan said, leaning forward. "She's been lying to you, son. To all of us." "That's ridiculous," Lucas scoffed. "I know Mia better than anyone. She would never lie to me. Jonathan reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick manila envelope. I think you'll want to see what's in here, he said, sliding it across the table. With trembling hands, Lucas opened the envelope and began to read the documents inside. As he did, his world tilted on its axis, everything he thought he knew crumbling around him. Because according to these papers, Mia Hernandez, his wife, the woman he had given up everything for, was not a simple housekeeper from Mexico. She was the long-lost daughter of Eduardo Vázquez, a powerful South American business tycoon who had disappeared under mysterious circumstances over 2 decades ago. And as Lucas continued to read, his mind reeling from this impossible revelation, he realized that his love story was about to take a turn he could never have anticipated. For Mia's true identity was just the beginning of a web of secrets, lies, and long-buried truths that would test their love in ways they could never have imagined. The stage was set for a tale of shocking discoveries, unexpected alliances, and the ultimate question: in a world built on secrets and deception, can true love truly conquer all? Lucas stared at the documents spread before him, his mind struggling to process the earth-shattering information they contained. The diner around him faded into a blur, the chatter of patrons and clinking of dishes reduced to a distant hum as he tried to reconcile what he was reading with the woman he thought he knew. Mia Hernandez. No, not Mia Hernandez. Maria Isabella Vázquez, the long-lost daughter of Eduardo Vázquez, once one of the wealthiest and most influential businessmen in South America. A man who had vanished without a trace over 2 decades ago, leaving behind a fortune and a legacy shrouded in mystery. This can't be true, Lucas muttered, looking up at his father with disbelief etched across his features. Jonathan Alcott's expression was a mixture of sympathy and resignation. I'm afraid it is, son. I had my suspicions for a while, but I needed to be sure before I came to you. Lucas's mind raced, recalling every moment he had spent with Mia, searching for any hint, any clue that might have revealed this incredible secret. But there was nothing. She had been perfect, kind, humble, hardworking. The idea that it had all been an act seemed impossible. But why? Lucas asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Why would she hide this? Why work as a housekeeper if she's the heir to a fortune? Jonathan leaned back in the booth, his eyes never leaving his son's face. That, Lucas, is the million-dollar question. Or should I say, the billion-dollar question. Because that's what we're talking about here. The Vázquez fortune is estimated to be in the billions, all of it locked away in trust funds and offshore accounts, waiting for the rightful heir to claim it. Lucas shook his head, still unable to fully grasp the situation. So you're saying Mia, or Maria, or whoever she is, has been pretending to be a housekeeper all this time? For what? To get close to our family? A ghost of a smile played on Jonathan's lips. You always were quick, son. Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. Though I don't think you were the initial target. What do you mean? Jonathan sighed heavily, suddenly looking every bit his age. There's something I need to tell you, Lucas. Something I've never told anyone, not even your mother. It's about Eduardo Vázquez, and why he disappeared all those years ago. Lucas leaned forward, his heart pounding in his chest. He had a feeling that whatever his father was about to reveal would change everything. Eduardo and I were more than just business rivals, Jonathan began, his voice low and intense. We were friends once, partners even. We had grand plans to merge our companies, to create an empire that would span both North and South America. But then, he trailed off, his eyes distant, lost in memories of a time long past. Then what, Dad? Lucas prompted, his curiosity overriding his anger and confusion. Jonathan's gaze refocused on his son. Then greed got the better of me. I saw an opportunity to take control of everything, Eduardo's company, his assets, all of it. I set him up, Lucas. Made it look like he was embezzling funds, laundering money for drug cartels. By the time he realized what was happening, it was too late. He had a choice. Flee and leave everything behind, or stay and face prison. Lucas felt as if the wind had been knocked out of him. His father, the man he had looked up to his entire life, was confessing to destroying another man's life out of sheer greed. My God, Dad, he breathed. How could you? Shame clouded Jonathan's features. I've asked myself that same question every day for the past 20 years, son. It's eaten away at me, tainted everything I've built. When I saw Maria, for the first time, I knew. She looks so much like her mother. I thought maybe this was my chance to make things right. Lucas's mind was reeling. So you hired her, knowing who she was? Jonathan nodded. I did. I thought if I could help her, protect her somehow, maybe it would balance the scales. But then you fell in love with her, and everything became so much more complicated. A terrible thought struck Lucas. Does she know about what you did to her father? The pained look on Jonathan's face was answer enough. I don't think so. At least, not everything. I think she suspects our family had something to do with her father's disappearance, but she doesn't know the details. Not yet. Lucas stood abruptly, nearly knocking over his untouched coffee. I need to go. I need to talk to Mia. Jonathan reached out, grasping his son's arm. Lucas, wait. There's more you need to know. About the danger you're both in. But Lucas shook off his father's hand. I don't want to hear any more from you right now, Dad. I need to hear the truth from Mia. With that, he stormed out of the diner, leaving Jonathan Alcott alone with his regrets and the weight of his past misdeeds. Mia paced the small motel room, anxiety gnawing at her insides. Lucas had been gone for hours, far longer than he should have been. Every worst-case scenario played through her mind on repeat. Lucas being forcibly taken back to Boston. Lucas deciding he had made a mistake in running away with her. Lucas. The sound of a key in the lock made her freeze. The door swung open, and there stood Lucas, his face a mask of emotions she couldn't quite read. Lucas, she cried, rushing towards him. Thank God you're all right. I was so worried. But her words died in her throat as she saw the look in his eyes. It was a look she had never seen before, a mixture of hurt, confusion, and something that looked unsettlingly like betrayal. Lucas, she said again, softer this time. What's wrong? What happened with your father? Lucas closed the door behind him, his movements slow and deliberate. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Who are you, really? Mia felt as if the floor had dropped out from beneath her. This was the moment she had dreaded, the moment she had prayed would never come. But looking into Lucas's eyes, she knew there was no more hiding, no more pretending. The time for truth had come. My name, she began, her voice trembling, is Maria Isabella Vasquez. And I think you deserve to know the whole story. Over the next hour, Mia, or Maria, as she revealed her true self to be, poured out the tale of her life. She spoke of a childhood filled with luxury and love, of a doting father who seemed larger than life. She recounted the terrible night when everything changed, when men in dark suits came to their mansion and her father rushed her and her mother out a secret passage, pressing a sealed envelope into her mother's hands and making them promise to disappear. We fled to Mexico, Maria continued, tears streaming down her face. My mother and I lived in hiding for years, always looking over our shoulders, never staying in one place for too long. When I was 18, my mother fell ill. On her deathbed, she gave me the envelope my father had entrusted to her. Inside was a letter explaining everything, the betrayal, the false accusations, the fortune hidden away where no one could find it. Lucas listened in stunned silence, his own tumultuous emotions warring within him. Part of him wanted to be angry, to feel betrayed by the lies. But looking at Maria, the woman he knew as Mia, the woman he loved, he could see the pain and fear in her eyes. This was not the calculated deception his father had implied. This was the desperate act of a woman trying to uncover the truth and reclaim her birthright. The letter mentioned your family, Maria continued. My father believed the Alcotts were somehow involved in his downfall. I took a job as a housekeeper in your home because I wanted to find out the truth. I never meant to fall in love with you, Lucas. That part was real. It's always been real. The silence that followed her confession was deafening. Lucas stood and walked to the window, staring out at the parking lot without really seeing it. His mind was a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts and emotions. Lucas? Maria's voice was small, frightened. Please say something. He turned to face her, his expression unreadable. I don't know what to say, Maria. I understand why you did what you did, but... God, we're married. We ran away together. How could you not tell me the truth? Maria moved towards him, her hand outstretched, but Lucas took a step back. The hurt in her eyes was like a physical blow. I wanted to tell you so many times, she said, her voice choked with emotion. But I was scared. Scared of losing you, scared of what might happen if the wrong people found out who I really was. Can you forgive me? Lucas ran a hand through his hair, his internal struggle evident on his face. I don't know, he said honestly. I love you, Maria. That hasn't changed. But this is a lot to process. I need some time. Maria nodded, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. I understand. I'll give you all the time you need. Just, please don't leave me. The vulnerability in her voice tugged at Lucas's heart. Despite everything, despite the lies and the secrets, he knew in that moment that he could no more leave her than he could stop breathing. He closed the distance between them, pulling her into his arms. Maria clung to him, her body shaking with silent sobs. I'm not going anywhere, Lucas murmured into her hair. We're in this together now, whatever this turns out to be. But no more secrets, okay? From now on, we face everything together. Maria looked up at him, hope shining through her tears. Together, she agreed. As they held each other in that small motel room, both Lucas and Maria knew that their journey was far from over. There were still so many questions unanswered, so many dangers lurking in the shadows. The truth about Eduardo Vasquez's disappearance, the location of the hidden fortune, the extent of Jonathan Alcott's involvement. All of these mysteries remained to be solved. But for now, in this moment, they had each other. And for now, that was enough. Little did they know that even as they reaffirmed their love and commitment, forces were already in motion that would test their bond to its very limits. For the secrets of the past have a way of refusing to stay buried, and the echoes of Eduardo Vasquez's downfall were about to resonate through their lives in ways they could never have imagined. As night fell over the small coastal town they had temporarily called home, Lucas and Maria drifted off to sleep in each other's arms, blissfully unaware of the storm that was gathering on the horizon. A storm that would sweep them up in a whirlwind of danger, deception, and destiny, forcing them to confront not only the sins of their fathers but the true strength of their love. The stage was set for a tale of redemption, revenge, and the power of forgiveness. For Lucas and Maria, the real adventure was only just beginning. The soft glow of dawn was just beginning to creep through the shabby motel curtains when Lucas awoke with a start. For a moment, he was disoriented, the events of the previous day feeling like a distant, surreal dream. But as he felt Maria stir beside him, the weight of reality came crashing back. His wife, the heiress, the woman he loved, who had been living a double life. Lucas watched her sleep, studying the face he thought he knew so well. In the pale morning light, he could see traces of the aristocratic beauty she must have inherited from her mother, the strength and determination that surely came from her father. How had he never noticed before? As if sensing his gaze, Maria's eyes fluttered open. For a heartbeat, there was nothing but love in her expression. Then memory flooded back, and he saw fear creep into her eyes. Good morning, Lucas said softly, reaching out to brush a strand of hair from her face. Maria caught his hand, pressing it to her cheek. You're still here, she whispered, relief evident in her voice. I told you, we're in this together, Lucas replied. No matter what. They lay in silence for a few moments, the weight of unspoken words hanging between them. Finally, Lucas sat up, his expression turning serious. We need to talk about what happens next, he said. My father, he knows who you are, Maria. And I think he knows more about what happened to your father than he's letting on. Maria nodded, sitting up as well. I've always suspected the Alcotts were involved somehow. But Lucas, there's something else you need to know. Something I didn't tell you yesterday. Lucas braced himself, wondering what other revelations could possibly be in store. The letter my father left, Maria continued, her voice barely above a whisper. It didn't just talk about the betrayal and the hidden fortune. It said there was evidence. Proof of who was behind his downfall, and where the money was hidden. He wrote that he'd scattered clues in places that were meaningful to our family, but that only his true heir would be able to piece them together. Lucas's mind raced with the implications. So it's like a treasure hunt? For billions of dollars and the truth about your father's disappearance? Maria nodded. Essentially, yes. But Lucas, if your father knows about this, if he's been looking for the clues all these years, then we're not the only ones in this race, Lucas finished grimly. And knowing my father, he won't stop until he gets what he wants. The gravity of their situation settled over them like a heavy blanket. They were no longer just star-crossed lovers on the run. They were players in a high-stakes game with potentially deadly consequences. What do we do? Maria asked, a hint of the scared young girl she must have been when her world first fell apart creeping into her voice. Lucas took her hand, squeezing it reassuringly. We do what your father wanted. We find those clues, we uncover the truth, and we clear his name. Together. Maria's eyes shone with a mixture of love and determination. Together, she agreed. As they hurriedly packed their meager belongings, a plan began to form. Maria remembered her father mentioning a safety deposit box in a bank in Miami, the city where she had spent the happiest years of her childhood. It seemed as good a place as any to start their search. They checked out of the motel and hit the road, the Florida sunshine a stark contrast to the dark clouds of uncertainty hanging over them. As Lucas drove, Maria pored over the letter from her father, searching for any hidden clues or messages they might have missed. Wait, she said suddenly, sitting up straight. I think I've found something. Lucas glanced over, curiosity piqued. What is it? Maria held the letter up to the light, squinting at the elegant handwriting. There's a series of numbers hidden in the letter spacing. I can't believe I never noticed it before. 28174233. Coordinates? Lucas suggested. Maria shook her head. No, it's too short. Maybe it's a code for the safety deposit box? It wasn't much, but it was a start. As Miami's skyline appeared on the horizon, both Lucas and Maria felt a surge of anticipation. They were one step closer to unraveling the mystery that had shaped both their lives in ways they were only beginning to understand. Little did they know, they weren't the only ones heading to Miami with the Vasquez fortune in their sights. In a sleek, black SUV several miles behind them, Jonathan Alcott sat in the back seat, his phone pressed to his ear. Yes, they're heading south on I-95, he said, his voice terse. No, I don't think they suspect they're being followed. Just make sure you're in position when they reach Miami. And remember, I want them unharmed. This is my son we're talking about. He ended the call, a heavy sigh escaping his lips. The weight of 2 decades of guilt and secrets pressed down on him, making him feel every one of his 60-plus years. I'm sorry, Lucas, he murmured to himself. But this is bigger than you know. Bigger than all of us. The First National Bank of Miami stood imposingly on Brickell Avenue, its glass and steel facade gleaming in the afternoon sun. Lucas and Maria approached the entrance, both acutely aware of how out of place they looked in their travel-worn clothes. Are you sure about this? Lucas asked, giving Maria's hand a reassuring squeeze. She nodded, steeling herself. It's our only lead. We have to try. They made their way to the safety deposit box area, where a polite but stern-looking clerk greeted them. May I help you? She asked, her eyes flickering between them with barely concealed suspicion. Maria stepped forward, summoning every ounce of the confidence she must have possessed as a child of privilege. Yes, I need to access a safety deposit box, please. It should be under the name Eduardo Vasquez. The clerk's eyebrows shot up. I see. And may I ask who you are? I'm his daughter, Maria replied, her voice steady despite the rapid beating of her heart. Maria Isabella Vasquez. The next few minutes were tense as the clerk made several phone calls, speaking in hushed tones that Lucas and Maria couldn't quite make out. Finally, she returned to the counter. Ms. Vasquez, I'll need to see some identification, please. And there's some paperwork you'll need to fill out. Maria produced the fake ID she'd been using, one of the few tangible links to her past life, and began filling out the required forms. Lucas stood by, feeling helpless and increasingly paranoid. Every person who entered the bank became a potential threat in his mind. After what felt like an eternity, they were finally led to a private room where the safety deposit box was brought to them. Maria's hands shook slightly as she input the code 28174233 and opened the box. Inside was a single envelope, yellowed with age, and a small, ornate key. Maria opened the envelope with trembling fingers, her eyes scanning the contents rapidly. Lucas watched as a myriad of emotions played across her face: hope, confusion, fear, and finally, a grim determination. "What is it?" he asked softly. Maria looked up at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "It's another letter from my father. And instructions. The key is for a private yacht, the Isabella's Dream, named after me. He says the next clue is hidden there." Lucas nodded, his mind already racing ahead to their next move. "Okay, so we find this yacht. Then what?" Maria's expression hardened. "Then we keep following the trail, no matter where it leads. My father says that each clue will not only lead us closer to the truth and the fortune, but will also unlock memories. Moments from my childhood that will help me understand why he did what he did." As they left the bank, the small key feeling impossibly heavy in Maria's pocket, neither of them noticed the black SUV parked across the street, or the man watching them through tinted windows. Jonathan Alcott picked up his phone, dialing a familiar number. "They've made contact," he said simply. Moved to phase 2. The marina was a hive of activity as Lucas and Maria made their way down the docks, searching for the Isabella's Dream. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, but neither of them had eyes for the beauty surrounding them. "There," Maria suddenly exclaimed, pointing to a sleek yacht moored at the end of the pier. The name, Isabella's Dream, was emblazoned on its side in elegant gold lettering. They approached cautiously, aware that they might not be alone in their search. The key fit perfectly in the lock, and with a soft click, they were aboard. The interior of the yacht was luxurious but showed signs of long disuse. A thin layer of dust covered every surface, and the air was stale and musty. "Where do we even start?" Lucas wondered aloud, taking in the spacious cabin. Maria closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. "My father said the clues would unlock memories. So maybe I need to think like my childhood self. Where would I have hidden something important?" She began to move through the yacht with purpose, her fingers trailing along walls and furniture as if trying to coax forgotten memories from the very fabric of the place. Lucas followed, alert for any sign of danger. In the master bedroom, Maria paused, her brow furrowed in concentration. I remember playing here as a little girl. There was a secret compartment." She moved to the ornate headboard, her fingers probing the intricate woodwork. Suddenly, there was a soft click, and a small drawer popped open. Inside was a weathered leather journal and a faded photograph. The journal bore the initials E.V. Eduardo Vázquez. The photograph showed a much younger Eduardo standing next to a man Lucas recognized with a jolt, his own father, Jonathan Alcott. "My God," Lucas breathed. They really were friends once. Maria was already flipping through the journal, her eyes widening as she scanned the pages. "Lucas, this is it. This journal, it details everything. The partnership between our fathers, the plans they had, and..." She trailed off, her face paling. "What is it?" Lucas asked, dread pooling in his stomach. "It wasn't just your father," Maria whispered. "There were others involved in the plot against my father. Powerful people, and according to this, they're still out there, still operating in the shadows." The implications of her words hung heavy in the air. This wasn't just about a hidden fortune or a decades-old betrayal. They had stumbled onto something much bigger, much more dangerous. Before either of them could speak, the sound of footsteps on the deck above made them freeze. Well, a familiar voice called out. "Isn't this a touching family reunion?" Lucas and Maria exchanged alarmed glances. Jonathan Alcott had found them. As they hurried up to the deck, Lucas's mind raced. How much had his father overheard? How much did he already know? Jonathan stood at the yacht's entrance, flanked by two burly men who were clearly not there for pleasant conversation. His expression was a mixture of triumph and, was that regret? "Dad," Lucas said, instinctively stepping in front of Maria. "What are you doing here?" Jonathan's eyes flicked between his son and Maria, lingering on the journal in her hands. "I think you know why I'm here, son. That journal, it contains information that could destroy a lot of very powerful people. Including me." Maria clutched the journal tighter. "It's the truth about what happened to my father. I have a right to know." "The truth?" Jonathan scoffed, though there was no real heat in his words. "The truth is a dangerous thing, my dear. Especially in our world." Lucas felt his anger rising. "Enough with the cryptic warnings, Dad. What's really going on here? Why have you been chasing us?" For a moment, Jonathan's carefully constructed facade cracked, revealing a glimpse of the tormented man beneath. "Because I'm trying to protect you, Lucas. Both of you. You have no idea what you're up against." "Then tell us," Maria pleaded. "Help us understand." Jonathan shook his head. "It's not that simple. There are forces at play here that—" His words were cut off by the sudden roar of engines. A sleek speedboat was approaching the yacht at an alarming rate. Jonathan's eyes widened in genuine fear. "No," he breathed. "They're here. We're out of time." "Who's here?" Lucas demanded. "Dad, what's going on?" But Jonathan was already in motion, gesturing urgently to his son and Maria. "There's no time to explain. You need to get out of here. Now." "We're not going anywhere until we get some answers," Lucas insisted. The speedboat was alongside the yacht now, and dark figures were boarding with practiced efficiency. Jonathan grabbed Lucas by the shoulders, his eyes wild with a mixture of fear and determination. "Listen to me, son. Everything I've done, everything I'm doing, is to keep you safe. But I can't protect you anymore. You need to run. Take Maria and that journal, and don't stop until you've uncovered the whole truth." "Dad, go," Jonathan roared, pushing them towards the back of the yacht. "There's a lifeboat. Use it. I'll hold them off." Lucas hesitated for a split second, torn between his anger at his father's deceptions and the primal urge to stay and protect him. But one look at Maria's frightened face made the decision for him. They raced to the lifeboat, the sound of shouting and what might have been gunshots spurring them on. As they lowered themselves into the water, Lucas caught one last glimpse of his father, standing defiantly on the deck of the yacht, facing down the oncoming threat. The small motor of the lifeboat roared to life, and they sped away into the gathering darkness. Lucas's mind was a whirlwind of questions and fears. Who were those people? What did they want? And what secrets were so terrible that his father would risk everything to keep them hidden? As the lights of Miami faded behind them, Lucas and Maria huddled together in the tiny boat, the journal clutched tightly between them. They were alone now, adrift both literally and figuratively, with nothing but each other and the promise of hidden truths to guide them. "What do we do now?" Maria asked, her voice barely audible over the sound of the waves. Lucas pulled her close, his eyes scanning the dark horizon. "We do what my father said. We keep running, and we don't stop until we know everything. Whatever's in that journal, whatever truth your father wanted you to find, it's our only chance now." As the first stars began to appear in the night sky, Lucas and Maria set a course for the unknown. Behind them, the echoes of gunfire faded, leaving only questions in their wake. The game had changed. What had started as a search for lost heritage and hidden fortunes had become a fight for survival. And somewhere out there, in the vastness of the ocean or the jungle of the city, lay the answers they sought, answers that would either save them or destroy them. Their love had been tested by lies and revelations. Now it would be forged in the fire of danger and tested against the weight of world-shaking truths. For Lucas and Maria, the real adventure was just beginning. The rhythmic lapping of waves against the lifeboat's hull was the only sound that broke the eerie silence of the open sea. Lucas and Maria had been drifting for hours, the lights of Miami long since faded into the darkness behind them. The adrenaline that had fueled their escape was wearing off, leaving them exhausted, scared, and increasingly aware of their precarious situation. "We can't stay out here forever," Maria said, her voice hoarse from the salt air. "We need a plan." Lucas nodded, his eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of land or other vessels. "You're right, but we also need to be careful. We don't know who's looking for us or how far their reach extends." Maria clutched Eduardo Vasquez's journal to her chest, as if it could shield her from the dangers that seemed to lurk in every shadow. Maybe we should read more of the journal. It might give us some clue about where to go next. Lucas hesitated. Part of him was desperate to know more, to understand the web of secrets and lies that had entangled both their families. But another part feared what they might discover. Sometimes, ignorance truly was bliss. But they were well past the point of blissful ignorance now. All right, he agreed, but let's wait until dawn. We'll be able to see better, and maybe we'll have a better idea of where we are. As if in answer to their dilemma, a faint glow appeared on the eastern horizon. The night was finally giving way to day, though whether this new dawn would bring hope or further peril remained to be seen. As the first rays of sunlight painted the sky in hues of pink and gold, Lucas and Maria huddled close, opening the weathered journal with trembling hands. The elegant handwriting of Eduardo Vasquez filled page after page, a testament to a life cut short and a legacy left unfulfilled. June 15, 1999, Maria read aloud, her finger tracing the words as if she could absorb her father's thoughts through touch alone. The deal with Alcott is proceeding as planned, but something feels off. Jonathan is pushing for faster expansion, riskier investments. I fear he may be in bed with some unsavory characters. Must investigate further. Lucas felt a chill run down his spine. This was the beginning of the end for Eduardo Vasquez, the first threads of the conspiracy that would ultimately tear both their families apart. As they continued reading, a picture began to emerge, one of corporate espionage, political maneuvering, and a shadowy organization known only as the Consortium. Eduardo's entries became increasingly paranoid, filled with coded messages and vague references to safeguards he had put in place. Look at this, Lucas said, pointing to an entry dated just weeks before Eduardo's disappearance. He mentions a place called Isla de los Secretos, the Island of Secrets. Says it holds the key to everything. Maria's brow furrowed in concentration. I think I remember something about an island. A family vacation when I was very young. But it's all so hazy. Before they could delve deeper into the mystery, a new sound cut through the morning air, the distant rumble of an engine. Lucas's head snapped up, scanning the horizon. There, approaching fast, was a boat. Quick, he hissed, closing the journal and stuffing it into the waterproof bag they'd found in the lifeboat. Get down. They crouched low, hearts pounding as the boat drew nearer. Was it friend or foe? Rescue or capture? As the vessel came alongside their small lifeboat, they heard a gruff voice call out. Ahoy there, you folks all right? Lucas and Maria exchanged a wary glance. After a moment's hesitation, Lucas slowly stood, shielding his eyes against the rising sun. The boat was a modest fishing vessel, its white paint peeling and its deck cluttered with nets and equipment. An older man with weathered skin and a salt and pepper beard stood at the helm, concern etched on his face. We're okay, Lucas called back, trying to keep the tremor out of his voice. Our yacht had some engine trouble. We had to abandon ship. The fisherman's eyebrows shot up. Engine trouble, Must have been some fancy yacht to be out this far. Well, can't leave you drifting out here. Come aboard, and we'll get you back to shore. Lucas and Maria shared another look, an entire conversation passing between them in silence. They had no way of knowing if this fisherman was truly what he seemed, or if he was part of the nebulous threat pursuing them. But they also knew they couldn't stay adrift forever. With no other choice, they accepted the fisherman's offer. As they clambered aboard the larger vessel, Lucas kept a protective arm around Maria, his eyes darting warily around the deck. Name's Hector, the fisherman said as he helped them aboard. And you two are? I'm Luke, Lucas lied smoothly. And this is my wife, Mia. Hector nodded, seemingly satisfied with their meager explanation. Well, Luke and Mia, you're in luck. I'm heading back to port now. Should have you on dry land in a couple of hours. As Hector turned his attention back to navigating, Lucas and Maria huddled near the stern, speaking in hushed tones. What do we do now? Maria whispered. We can't go back to Miami. It's too dangerous. Lucas nodded, his mind racing. The island your father mentioned, Isla de los Secretos. That's our next move. We need to find it. But how? We don't even know where it is. Lucas's eyes scanned the cluttered deck of the fishing boat, landing on a battered laptop partially hidden under a tarp. Maybe we can do some research once we're back on land. Find out if there's any record of an island by that name. As they neared the coast, a small fishing village came into view. It was a far cry from the glittering skyscrapers of Miami, with weathered wooden buildings and small boats bobbing in a protected harbor. "Welcome to Puerto Escondido," Hector announced as they approached the dock. "It's not much, but it's home." Lucas and Maria thanked Hector profusely as they disembarked, their legs wobbly after hours at sea. The small village buzzed with early morning activity, fishermen preparing for the day's catch, shopkeepers opening their doors, the tantalizing aroma of fresh bread wafting from a nearby bakery. "There's a small inn just up the road," Hector said, pointing to a quaint two-story building with a faded sign. "Tell Rosita that Hector sent you. She'll give you a good rate." With another round of thanks, Lucas and Maria made their way up the dusty street. Every face they passed seemed to regard them with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Clearly, strangers were a rarity in Puerto Escondido. The inn was a modest affair, but clean and welcoming. Rosita, a plump woman with a kind face and graying hair, greeted them warmly. "Friends of Hector, E.H.?" she said as she led them to a small room on the second floor. "Any friend of Hector is a friend of mine. You two rest up now. You look like you've had quite an adventure." If only she knew. Once alone in their room, Lucas and Maria finally allowed themselves to relax slightly. The events of the past 24 hours crashed over them like a wave, leaving them physically and emotionally drained. "We should try to get some sleep," Lucas said, noting the dark circles under Maria's eyes. "We'll be safer here, at least for a little while." Maria nodded, but her expression remained troubled. "Lucas, I'm sorry. For everything. If I had never taken the job with your family, if I had just left well enough alone." Lucas silenced her with a gentle kiss. Don't apologize for wanting the truth. For wanting justice for your father. We're in this together, remember?" As they lay down on the narrow bed, holding each other close, both were acutely aware of the journal hidden in their bag. Its secrets weighed heavily on them, a Pandora's box they had opened and could never again close. But sleep, when it finally came, was fitful and filled with strange dreams. Maria found herself running through a lush jungle, her father's voice calling out to her from just beyond her reach. Lucas dreamed of shadowy figures in suits, their faces obscured, closing in on him from all sides. They awoke late in the afternoon, the sun already low on the horizon. After a simple meal in the inn's small dining room, during which they couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, they set out to explore the village. Their goal was twofold: find a way to research the mysterious Isla de los Secretos, and procure supplies for whatever journey lay ahead. They had no illusions that they could stay in Puerto Escondido for long. Sooner or later, their pursuers would pick up their trail. As luck would have it, they stumbled upon a small internet cafe tucked away down a side street. The computers were old and the connection painfully slow, but it was better than nothing. While Maria kept watch, Lucas hunched over the keyboard, searching for any mention of Isla de los Secretos. Most of the results were dead ends, myths and legends of hidden pirate treasure, New Age retreats promising to reveal the secrets of the universe. But then, buried deep in the search results, something caught his eye. A small news article from nearly 2 decades ago. Prominent businessman Eduardo Vázquez reported missing. Last seen departing for private island retreat. Lucas's heart raced as he clicked the link. The article was frustratingly vague, mentioning only that Vázquez had embarked on a trip to a private island, somewhere in the Caribbean. The exact location was not disclosed. "It's not much," Lucas murmured to Maria, "but it's a start. If we can find out which marina he left from, maybe we can retrace his steps." As they left the internet cafe, the sun had fully set, casting long shadows across the narrow streets. They were so engrossed in discussing their next move that they almost didn't notice the sleek black car that pulled up alongside them. The rear window rolled down, revealing a face that made both Lucas and Maria freeze in their tracks. "Hello, darling," Veronica Alcott said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Did you really think you could run from us forever?" Before either of them could react, two men in dark suits emerged from the shadows, grabbing them roughly and bundling them into the waiting car. As the vehicle sped away from Puerto Escondido, Lucas met his mother's cold gaze. "Where's Dad?" he demanded. "What have you done with him?" Veronica's laugh was devoid of any real mirth. "Oh, Lucas, you always were so naive. Your father is exactly where he needs to be. As for you two, well, let's just say we have a lot to discuss." The car wound its way up a steep, winding road, eventually pulling up to a sprawling hacienda overlooking the sea. As they were ushered inside, Lucas and Maria exchanged a look of grim determination. Whatever came next, they would face it together. But neither of them was prepared for what awaited them in the hacienda's opulent study. For there, seated behind a massive mahogany desk, was a man Maria had thought lost forever. "Hello, mi hija," Eduardo Vázquez said, his voice thick with emotion. "It's been far too long." Maria's world tilted on its axis. Her father, the man whose disappearance had shaped her entire life, was alive. And apparently working with the very people who had betrayed him. As Lucas watched the color drain from Maria's face, he knew that their ordeal was far from over. The game had changed once again, and the stakes were higher than ever. The truth they had been chasing for so long was finally within reach. But would that truth set them free, or trap them in a web from which there was no escape? As Eduardo Vázquez rose from his chair, arms outstretched towards his long-lost daughter, the next chapter of their impossible story was about to unfold. The study of the hacienda seemed to hold its breath as Maria stared at the man she had believed dead for over 2 decades. Eduardo Vázquez stood before her, older and grayer than in her memories, but undeniably alive. His eyes, so like her own, were filled with a storm of emotions: love, regret, and something darker that Maria couldn't quite place. "Papa?" she whispered, her voice trembling. How is this possible?" Eduardo took a step towards her, his arms still outstretched. "Mi pequeña Isabella," he said, using the pet name from her childhood. "I know you must have so many questions. I promise, I will explain everything." But as he moved to embrace her, Maria took a step back, bumping into Lucas, who instinctively put a protective arm around her. The hurt that flashed across Eduardo's face was quickly masked by a polite smile. "I see," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "Of course. This must be quite a shock for you." Veronica Alcott, who had been watching the scene unfold with barely concealed impatience, finally spoke up. "As touching as this family reunion is, I believe we have more pressing matters to discuss." Lucas turned to his mother, anger bubbling up inside him. "More pressing than the fact that you've been lying to us for years? That you've apparently been working with a man everyone thought was dead?" Veronica's eyes flashed dangerously. "Watch your tone, Lucas. You have no idea of the forces at play here." "Then enlighten us," Maria said, finding her voice at last. Her initial shock was giving way to a simmering anger of her own. "Tell us why you've torn our families apart, why you've been chasing us across the country. Tell us the truth." Eduardo and Veronica exchanged a loaded glance. It was clear that neither had anticipated this level of resistance from their children. "Perhaps," Eduardo said slowly, "it would be best if we all sat down. This is a long story, and not an easy one to tell." Reluctantly, Lucas and Maria allowed themselves to be guided to a seating area near a large fireplace. The crackling flames did little to warm the chill that had settled over the room. Eduardo began to speak, his words carefully chosen. 20 years ago, I discovered something. Something that could change the world as we know it. At first, I thought it was a miracle. A way to solve so many of the world's problems. But then I realized the danger it posed if it fell into the wrong hands." He paused, his gaze distant as if lost in memories. "I tried to keep it secret, to protect it. But others found out. Powerful people who would stop at nothing to get their hands on it." "The consortium," Lucas interjected, remembering the name from Eduardo's journal. Eduardo's eyes snapped to Lucas, a mixture of surprise and approval in his expression. "Yes, the consortium. A group of the world's most influential people, politicians, business leaders, even royalty. They wanted what I had discovered, and they were willing to do anything to get it. So you faked your own death, Maria said, the pieces starting to fall into place. You let everyone believe you were gone, even your own family. The pain in Eduardo's eyes was unmistakable. It was the hardest decision I've ever had to make, Mia. But I thought it was the only way to keep you and your mother safe. Safe? Maria scoffed, years of pent-up hurt and anger finally boiling over. Do you have any idea what your death did to us? How we struggled, how we lived in constant fear. Eduardo seemed to physically recoil from her words. I never wanted that for you. I thought Jonathan would take care of you. At this, Veronica let out a harsh laugh. Oh, he took care of them all right. Took them right into our home, under our noses. Lucas turned to his mother, confusion written across his face. What are you talking about? Dad hired Maria, years after Mr. Vasquez disappeared. A cruel smile played at the corners of Veronica's mouth. Is that what you think? Your father may be many things, Lucas, but he's not that foolish. He knew exactly who Maria was when he brought her into our home. The implications of her words hung heavy in the air. Lucas felt as if the ground was shifting beneath his feet, everything he thought he knew crumbling away. But why? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Why bring her in if he knew? Because, my dear boy, came a new voice from the doorway. Sometimes the best place to hide something is in plain sight. All heads turned to see Jonathan Alcott striding into the room, looking none the worse for wear despite the dramatic scene on the yacht just days before. Dad? Lucas said, rising to his feet. What the hell is going on? Jonathan's eyes swept the room, taking in the tableau before him. His son and Maria huddled together on the sofa. Veronica perched regally in an armchair, and Eduardo standing awkwardly by the fireplace. I see we've reached the moment of truth, he said with a wry smile. Though I must say, I had hoped to break it to you more delicately. Eduardo stepped forward, his expression hardening. Enough games, Jonathan. They deserve to know everything. Jonathan nodded, his usual air of confident charm replaced by something more somber. You're right, old friend. It's time. Over the next hour, Jonathan and Eduardo laid out a tale so incredible, so fraught with danger and world-altering implications, that Lucas and Maria could scarcely believe their ears. The discovery Eduardo had made all those years ago was nothing short of revolutionary, a new form of clean, limitless energy that could end the world's dependence on fossil fuels overnight. But with that discovery came a terrible burden, for the technology could also be weaponized, turned into a force of unimaginable destruction. We knew we couldn't let it fall into the wrong hands, Jonathan explained. But we also knew that simply destroying the research wasn't enough. The consortium would stop at nothing to recreate it. So we devised a plan, Eduardo continued. A plan to scatter the key components of the discovery across the globe, hidden in plain sight. And to create a series of safeguards that only the right person, someone with the proper moral compass and understanding, could unlock. Maria's eyes widened as understanding dawned. The clues in your journal. The island. It was all part of this plan? Eduardo nodded, a hint of pride in his eyes. Yes, Mia. You were always meant to be the key. Your experiences, your choices, they've all been leading you to this moment. Lucas felt a surge of anger on Maria's behalf. So her entire life has been some kind of test? A game you've been playing? Not a game, Jonathan said firmly. A necessity. The fate of the world hangs in the balance. We had to be sure. Veronica, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke up. And now that they know? What happens next? All eyes turned to Eduardo and Jonathan. The two men exchanged a long look, years of shared secrets and burdens passing between them. Now, Eduardo said slowly, we finish what we started. We retrieve the components, we unlock the final safeguards, and we make a decision that will change the course of human history. And the consortium? Maria asked, her voice tight with barely contained emotion. What about them? Jonathan's expression darkened. They're still out there, still searching, and they're closer than ever to finding what they seek. Which is why we need to move quickly, Eduardo added. The clues I left, the path I set out, it all leads to one final location. The place where everything began, and where it must now end. Isla de los Secretos, Lucas breathed, the pieces finally falling into place. Eduardo nodded gravely. Yes, the Island of Secrets. It's there that we'll face our final test, and make our final stand against the consortium. A heavy silence fell over the room as the weight of their situation settled upon them all. Lucas and Maria exchanged a look, an entire conversation passing between them without a word being spoken. Despite the lies, despite the manipulation, they knew they had no choice but to see this through to the end. When do we leave? Lucas asked, his voice steady and determined. Jonathan smiled, a hint of his old charm returning. That's my boy. We leave at dawn. The journey to the island is treacherous, and we'll need all our wits about us. As the others began to discuss logistics, transportation, supplies, contingency plans, Maria pulled Lucas aside. Are you sure about this? She whispered, her eyes searching his. This is bigger than anything we could have imagined. We could walk away, start a new life somewhere far from all of this. Lucas cupped her face gently, his thumb tracing the curve of her cheek. We could, he agreed. But you and I both know we won't. This is your legacy, Maria. And whatever comes next, we face it together. Maria leaned into his touch, drawing strength from his unwavering support. Together, she echoed. As the sun began to set over the hacienda, casting long shadows across the study, the unlikely group of allies made their final preparations. The journey ahead would be fraught with danger, testing not only their courage and resolve but the very bonds of family and love that had brought them to this point. For Lucas and Maria, it was the culmination of a love story that had defied all odds. From a chance meeting as housekeeper and employer's son to partners in a quest to save the world, their path had been anything but ordinary. And as they stood on the precipice of their greatest adventure yet, both knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, their love would be the compass guiding them through the storm. The Island of Secrets awaited, holding within its shores the key to humanity's future. And with it, the promise of a new beginning for Lucas and Maria, a future forged in the fires of truth, tempered by the strength of their bond, and limitless in its potential. As night fell over the hacienda, the stage was set for the final act of their extraordinary tale. The world held its breath, unaware of the drama unfolding in its midst, as a most unlikely group of heroes prepared to face their destiny.